Boston Bruins captain Brad Marchand isn't exactly coming in hot to training camp, as it was revealed on Tuesday that he underwent not one, not two, but 3 offseason surgeries.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What time is it? It's game time, and you should download the Game Time app today. On the show today, we're going to discuss what we learned following the captain's practice on Tuesday, specifically in relation to the captain, Brad Marchand, his offseason surgeries, his pending contract status, as well as his mentality coming into this season. Before we get going, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. We're exactly 2 weeks away from the beginning of Boston Bruins training camp. It opens on September 18th, and on Tuesday, Brad Marchand hosted a captain's practice, which was an informal gathering of prospective Bruins, current Bruins, even a former Bruin or two. I know Chris Wagner was there in the mix. And afterwards, it was revealed that Marchand underwent 3 different surgeries in the offseason. He had one for a torn tendon in his elbow, and he also underwent groin and hernia procedures. This is all on top, of course, of the injury that he suffered during the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Florida Panthers when he was sucker punched by Sam Bennett and missed a few games in that series before returning for a Game 6 loss that ended Boston's season. So clearly a head injury going on there to go along with his elbow, groin, hernia. A veritable operation table, if you remember that board game from when we were kids. What does that all mean? Well, his goal is to try to be ready for camp, he said, via Fluto Shinzawa of the Athletic is what I'm looking at here, if not very shortly after. He said he was just kind of getting back into the swing of things here now, with 2 weeks left before training camp. He said this summer was not typical for what he is used to. It might take until the season starts for him to ramp up to full strength. It might even take a little bit into the season. He said, quote, "But I'll treat the next 2 months like the summer, train and skate the way I normally would during the summer." 2 months from now, the season will be well underway. So we can expect perhaps Marchand to not necessarily come out swinging here to begin the season. It's not dissimilar to the situation he was in a couple of years ago, though, where he was coming off major surgery. He only missed, 9 games, and still managed 21 goals, 46 assists for 67 points in 73 games. Last season, he played a full 82 games, 29 goals, 38 assists for 67 points as well. Now, he's not exactly in the peak of his career. He's 36 years old. He's going to turn 37 on May 11th. So the getting up to speed process may be a bit longer than it was a few years ago when he was a bit younger, in his early to mid 30s. This guy has 1,029 games under his belt. He's coming in more at ease with the responsibility of the captaincy, than he was last summer when he was first taken over from Patrice Bergeron. And as Fluto Shinzawa notes here in this athletic piece, compared to some of his peers, he's not hard up for maximum camp reps. He's coming in, easing into things, and he's satisfied with his strength. Power and conditioning, though, are different stories, and it's not ideal, as we'll discuss coming up, that he's entering the last season of his 8-year, $49 million contract. He did skate before the session under the watch of skating and skills coach John McLaren, but he did not play in the 5-on-5 game during the captain's practice. He did not go through any drills, and there's going to be some more solo sessions and gym work in his future. It's nice that he basically knows who he's going to be playing with down the middle at least. It won't take him long to settle in alongside Charlie Coyle, who you can't say he replaced Patrice Bergeron, but he came in and handled that role admirably as Marchand's new, well, not wingman, but centerman. Marchand's the wingman. He's obviously always been committed to fitness. That will serve him well, as it did when he returned early from that double hip surgery 2 seasons ago. But there is the added stress of the unknown here, as he is entering the final year of this contract, and because he's going to be 37 by the time this year ends. How does this all play into his next contract situation? Before we touch on that, I did want to note that Jeremy Swayman was in attendance at the captain's practice. He, of course, is without a contract. And when you're in that situation, there's always the possibility that it's so tense that you kind of want to make yourself scarce or not be around the rink, not participating with the guys, because you don't want to injure yourself, but also because of that tension that's lingering, kind of that uncertainty, not wanting to be a distraction. He was there, a full participant, which is great to see. And hopefully these two can come to an agreement very soon with 2 weeks left before training camp here on a new contract. But speaking of those contracts, we're going to discuss Brad Marchand entering a contract year here as the podcast continues. I'm a huge Game Time fan. I've used it several times to purchase tickets for baseball games, hockey games, concerts. You can even get theater and comedy shows near you as well. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the view from your seat, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. And their lowest price guarantee means they will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a seat in the same section and row for less. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Hey, what time is it? Oh, it's game time. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. For your second listen, check out Locked On NHL. Provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's also available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Much of the focus for the Boston Bruins and the fans over the last little bit has been the Jeremy Swayman contract apparent stalemate. But it's worth noting that Brad Marchand will become an unrestricted, or can become an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. He's entering the final year of an 8-year contract he signed before the 2016-17 season, $49 million over those 8 years, and he has given the Bruins insane value on that deal since that time. 2016-17, he had 85 points the next season. He hit a career high 100 points in 2018-19. Point totals of 87 in 70 games, 69 points in 53 games, 80 points in 70 games, and then back-to-back 67-point seasons here over the past 2 seasons. So the question is, do the Bruins come in with an offer for a 37-year-old who's on kind of the back 9, maybe the back 4 or 5 of his career, or do they look back at the value that he gave them and give him a contract that's perhaps above market value for what his worth is at this time? Brad Marchand doesn't want to talk about it at all. He said he's going to say this now and kind of leave it at this. Quote, "I won't ever talk about contract stuff in the media." He said, "I saw a report the other day. I don't know where he's getting his information. It wasn't from our side. We're not going to talk about it. Whatever goes on will stay internal between Don Sweeney and our group. I'll leave it at that. I think there's enough respect between the two sides that we can deal with it." End quote. What's the report he's referring to? Well, I'm pretty sure it's a Ken Campbell piece that appeared in the Hockey News on August 29th. And the crux of this article was Brad Marchand took a team-friendly 8-year extension before breaking out as one of the best players at his position. And for years, the mentality around the Bruins was that they do things differently, where the team and the players know that these guys will take less in order to keep the culture strong and to keep the core group together. Bergeron had a very team-friendly contract, as did David Pastrnak prior to signing his $11.25 million contract. Charlie McAvoy was the first to really get paid, $9.5 million. Jeremy Swayman, who knows where he'll come in, but somewhere in that range, he'll be one of the top 3 paid players on this team. Ken Campbell suggested all of a sudden perhaps the Bruins aren't doing things all that differently anymore. So how does Marchand view the situation? One that will see him potentially become a UFA after this season. Ken Campbell wrote, he'll be 37 by then and won't be cashing in the way McAvoy, Pastrnak, and presumably Swayman have. But if he can score 30 and still be a massive pain in the rear end, he'll definitely have some value, likely on a deal that would be no more than 3 years. But will it be with Boston? They want him back. He wants to be back. But Marchand has carried a lot of water for the organization over the past decade or so and been a company man, perhaps to a fault. Campbell added there have been no negotiations between the Bruins and Marchand's camp, but that could change in training camp. Once the Swayman situation is resolved, the Bruins will almost certainly turn their attention to Marchand. It'll be interesting to see how this goes. So Campbell's basically suggesting that Marchand took a team-friendly deal. He's been a company man, but he's seen these younger guys getting paid. And if the Bruins aren't going to come in with a reasonable offer, not paying him as a 37-year-old on the downswing of his career, that maybe he would entertain moving on. Don Sweeney did say after this past season that the goal was to make Marchand a lifelong Bruin, but there hasn't really been anything since then. Marchand and the Bruins obviously have the mutual goal of getting back to the Stanley Cup final, competing for hockey's greatest trophy. Marchand clearly has no desire to talk about it, and basically refuting this report that he would entertain moving on or feels perhaps slighted because he had this nice team-friendly contract for so long, and these younger guys are getting paid perhaps prior to hitting their primes. Same thing kind of happened with him. It just so happens that he hit his prime later in his career, like 6-7 seasons in. Had his best season in 2018, 2019, when he was already 30 years old. Will he want to make good on that coming out of this, or will he be content taking a more veteran contract with some bonuses, etc.? He doesn't want to talk about it. He still clearly has a lot to give, even with the injuries he was playing through last year that required offseason surgery. He had that massive couple of games against the Toronto Maple Leafs to propel the Bruins to arguably an upset win over Toronto in the first round of the playoffs. He battled through that head injury to come back and play in Game 6 against the Florida Panthers, and still a very tenacious guy who gets under people's skin, who can put the puck in the net. Almost had a 30-goal season last year, and hopefully he's able to come in this year and really prove that he's still a big-time player for the Boston Bruins, especially when it matters most in the playoffs. What is his mentality? Well, he shed some light on that, and we'll discuss it here coming up as the podcast continues. So Brad Marchand, without a contract beyond this season, it's a deal that pays him an average of 6.7 something million. He's no longer one of the team's highest paid players. In fact, he's behind David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm up front. Marchand making $6.125 million against the cap this season. It's below Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm on the back end as well, and likely will be behind Jeremy Swayman. So is he the outside of the top 5 when it comes to the most important players on this team? You could argue he's more important than Lindholm, or both the Lindholms, really, at this point. He knows that there are whispers about not only the team taking steps back at some point soon, but he himself. He admitted that on Tuesday, saying, as you get older, everybody's trying to push you out. The younger guys are trying to take your job. Teams are looking to go young. You almost have to have the same mindset that you need to show you can still play, keep up with the young guys, and keep up with new talent. Fortunately, Marchand doesn't have much in the way of competition on the left side for the Bruins, especially with the departures of Jake DeBrusk and Danton Heinen. DeBrusk had been playing on the right side. Heinen can play all over the ice. Pavel Zacha is penciled in on the top line, but he's really a center. Trent Frederick, Max Jones are the other guys behind him. You could perhaps argue that Trent Frederick, maybe he's on a similar career trajectory as Marchand, and he could break out, score 40 goals, hit 100 points, but the likelihood of that happening, let's be honest, isn't super high. Although he does have some offensive upside and was a first-round pick, higher picked than Marchand. He still has a lot to play for, Marchand said. He's at 71 points short of 1,000. And according to Fluto, he wants another shot at the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett, whose sucker punch played a part in the Bruins' second-round exit. He's desperate to play for Team Canada at the 2026 Olympics. He will be a member of Team Canada for the Four Nations Cup, almost assuredly. In fact, I believe he was one of the first picks for Team Canada for the Four Nations face-off, I should say, along with Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Connor McDavid, and Braden Point. Marchand was one of the original selections. maybe due to the fact that Don Sweeney's general manager of that team, but also on his own merits for sure. He was a key member of the gold medal winning team at the World Cup of Hockey. He won back-to-back gold medals for the World Juniors, a gold medal at the World Championships. You know, he wants to become a member of that exclusive club that has a cup, World Junior gold, Olympic gold, add to that World Cup gold, World Championship gold. You know that is on his radar and that he wants to be at the top of his game for 2026 when Canada NHL players will be back at the Olympics. He said it's very easy, especially as you get older and you've been around for a long time and accomplished a lot of things you want to accomplish. It's easy to feel comfortable in your financial situation, want to be around the house more, to be with the kids, be involved in sports and activities, and not be at the rink or the gym as often. But he said that's where guys slip. The biggest factor is understanding that guys are coming in and gunning for jobs. It doesn't matter who you are. They're just as happy to take my spot as anybody else's. And yes, you could be talking about the Bruins, although there's really no danger at this point of him losing his job to a young kid. Nobody's coming in and taking over that arguably the top left wing spot. Even though Zaka's on the first line with Lindholm and Pasternak, Marchand's number one on your left wing depth chart. Don't make any mistake about that. And nobody's really coming up to take that until he really falls off or they sign somebody or develop someone who can play at that level. But he's also referring to the international level as well. There's obviously a lot more competition when it comes to making Team Canada. And I truly believe that is a goal of his to be ready to play in Italy next winter as a member of Team Canada. So, maybe he won't be 100% or fully up to speed to begin this regular season, but you can bet he'll be there pretty quickly, especially by February. Want to make a strong showing at the Four Nations face-off in order to cement himself as a member of Team Canada at the Olympics in 2026. So Brad Marchand saying he's going to need a couple of months perhaps to get back to full speed, or is a couple months behind his regular training regimen at the very least. 3 off-season surgeries, elbow, groin, hernia. Also had that head injury that he's had been dealing with in the Florida series. No contract to speak of, but there's no reason to believe that the goal of him remaining a lifelong Bruin isn't still on the table. For him to win a Stanley Cup as captain of the Boston Bruins after all the blood, sweat, and tears that he has poured into this franchise would be incredibly meaningful, especially since his best friend and Patrice Bergeron didn't get to achieve that goal as captain. And while there maybe he'll get more than market value or maybe less than market value to remain with the Bruins, it could still be more than what a typical 37-year-old might make. Look at guys like James Van Riemsdyk without a contract, Tyler Johnson coming in, 2-time Stanley Cup champion on a PTO. There's plenty of guys who are still unsigned at this point. Brad Marchand, I don't believe, is going anywhere, and I expect still a pretty big season out of him, and the Bruins will need that if they have any chance of truly competing this season. Don't forget, he was the team's second leading scorer last year, and fully expect that he'll be still top 3 at least, perhaps with Lindholm overtaking him in a best case scenario. That's it for today's episode, my friends. I hope you are all having a great week. It's the first day of school here where I am recording, and so there's less Fortnite screaming in the background, less kids coming in asking for snacks. getting more into our routine here. 2 weeks until training camp. We're ramping up our output here on Locked On Boston Bruins. So please do subscribe so that you never miss a thing. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Pocket Cast is what I use. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. And now go check out Locked On NHL, where the season never ends. They're providing national expertise with local perspective. You can find it on the Locked On NHL description in my notes, so you don't have to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a good one, friends, and we'll talk to you here again tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins.